If you've watched my reviews for over the last, almost a decade at this point, you've probably heard me say before that I am just the guy who, among film critics, is just not that into the Mission Impossible movies. I understand why people like Tom Cruise, even before the whole The Last Movie Star thing happened. I understand why people enjoyed these movies. I understand why they were kind of a standard bearer as the James Bond movies tried and failed and tried and failed and tried and failed to figure out what they were supposed to be. But this always seemed like the placeholder thing when there weren't other action franchises that had a stronger identity among them. And I think what it comes down to is the thing that people like about these, that they're a template without another branding on top of them, is the reason that I just can't get into them. As much as I appreciate the Tom Cruise action thing, where he runs away from cool stuff and then runs into the middle of cool stuff and then runs over cool stuff and occasionally does a cool stunt to prove that he really does have magic space blood and nothing can destroy him, I tend to enjoy it more when there's like an actual story or stakes or something going on around it, like a Top Gun or even Edge of Tomorrow or whatever it's actually called now. Whereas in these, the whole point to the Mission Impossible movies, apart from the first one, is that there really isn't a set stake or concept. It doesn't really matter what anyone's name is. I really challenge people who are fans of these films to tell me anyone other than Ethan Hunt's actual name, or what the story has ever been, what the sides are other than sort of America and sort of the rest of the world, and what the general guiding compass of anything is other than that Ethan Hunt is the living manifestation of destiny, or whatever the self-aggrandizing stuff about how cool Tom Cruise is this time.
He's all thanks to all men, and maybe to one lucky gal.
Which is fine, it's fun, it's the skeleton of an action movie, but you get that from, say, The Fast and the Furious, but also with the concept of cars stretched over it, or the Marvel stuff with the concept of superheroes stretched over it, or martial arts films with the concept of various historical periods of feudal Japan or varying dynasties of ancient China stretched over it. Here it's just sort of Tom Cruise running through different places in geography, jumping into different cars and trains and stuff, which is fine. It's just why I watch them, I enjoy them, and then they leave my mind, other than, oh yeah, that was the one with the train, that was the one with jumping out of the plane, that was the one with hanging onto the plane. Fun, fine. I'm just not sure why I was ever supposed to treat this as the slightly more important bespoke action franchise compared to anything else before the John Wick movies showed up and took that spot by being infinitely more stylistic and infinitely more unusual, interesting, just a little bit more weird. And frankly, if there is sort of a Coke versus Pepsi thing, I'm more of a John Wick guy than a Mission Impossible guy, and I'm cool with that. Not that this one isn't good, it's a lot of fun. I think it's probably a little better than the last one, I would say. I think people more judge these by how cool the big stunt was in each one, and in this case, I think like the big stunt is maybe not as big as the others, but the big final cool action scene in this one is a big final cool action scene, and I think that if the characters were characters that you would give a shit about, it would probably be an all-timer instead of a, hey, I bet that was really tough to pull off, cool, I will remember that. Ironically, what's most interesting about this one is that while the story itself isn't exactly that memorable or interesting because, again, these characters are not characters, it's sort of glibly, amusingly interesting on a meta level because this time the villain is that Tom Cruise is now fighting the concept of technology and the march of time itself, a self-aware AI program that has gone rogue and is now fighting human intelligence agencies, apparently to prove that it can do its job better than humans can, which includes creating whole digital spies out of thin air that only exist on cameras and arranging meetings and sending spies to do dirty work. Basically, it's not even Terminator, it's Tom Cruise versus an AI that thinks it can movie star better than Tom Cruise. Subtle.
I know writers who use subtext and they're all cowards.
I mean, for real now. After seeing Ethan Hunt fight the Entity, I'm done with any movie being criticized for being too meta ever again, because we found the line and it's that. Which is pretty ironic considering, like I said, the rest of this franchise has always felt to me like what you'd now call something written by an AI. The characters are stock, the plots are stock, it's mainly Mission Impossible characters plugged into, yes, better directed, more expensive, better stunt versions of stuff from other action movies. And you can sort of track the progress of the rest of the American action scene by the way that the Mission Impossible franchise eventually borrows pieces of it and incorporates it in. You had John Woo coming in to do Mission Impossible 2, and now you have this one upgrading itself from the franchise that was supposedly the more bespoke, classy alternative to all that Marvel nonsense in the 2010s to a franchise that has to borrow actors from the Marvel roster in the form of Haley Atwell and Pom Klementieff to make itself more interesting. Because a lot of the sequences that make this one really pop are driven by these new two female co-leads. Atwell is a lot of fun. She's great. She brings a lot of energy to her scenes with Cruise. They actually have some chemistry, which is not something that you can say for people that often have to try and match up with them in these. And Pom Klementieff as a henchwoman in this, who gets a big car action scene and some big fight scenes, is just magnificent in this. Again, I had a lot of fun with it while I was watching it. If it sounds like I'm a little unenthused right now, it's just because I've had a long week, honestly. I was a little, and this was about a week and a half ago, so to be honest, I've managed to forget even more than I usually forget about the Mission Impossible movies here. But it is fun. Call it a 7 out of 10, and this time it's actually a legit to be continued, so to the degree that there was some story this time, I hope I can remember what sort of was supposed to have happened for the next one. But again, 7 out of 10, enjoyed it. Yeah, I guess we'll see what happens next.